let me do a quick introduction. For those of you who don't know Catherine Karnow, she's a San Francisco and Provence-based National Geographic photographer. She's photographed for countless international magazines and books, and we're so thrilled to have her here. One of the big highlights is that she gained unprecedented access to Prince Charles for a National Geographic feature called Not Your Typical Radical. So, of course, Prince Charles has gone on to be King Charles. So that was a nice little stepping stone. So another notable life project for Catherine has been her 30 years photographing Vietnam, including documenting families affected with Agent Orange. And she's regularly profiled in the Vietnamese press. But I want to spend just a moment or two on these wonderful photo workshops she leads in Italy, Provence, Romania, Vietnam, in India, Cambodia, and they're unique in the world of photos and tours and workshops. You guys probably don't know this about me, but I've been rubbing elbows with many workshop leaders and pro photographers for over 15 years. And when I talked to Catherine about how she runs her workshops, it's very clear that she's all about giving her guests privileged access to people and places that they would have never had on their own. If you're going to fly in somewhere, hire a local tour guide and act like a tourist, you're going to get what you get. And what she delivers is an opportunity to learn photography from an experienced photographer, a gifted teacher, and someone who's walked the walk and talked the talk. And one of the things I loved about her description earlier when we were talking was that she's coming at her workshops as a photojournalist. So think about that for a second. What is a photojournalist about? There's inquiry, there's an investigative approach, there's curiosity, there's finding access to places off the beaten path. It's not tourism. It's a workshop led by a highly experienced teacher and offering true deep learning, not just behind the camera, but also learning the world around you on the tour there. So I would be honored. It'd be super astonishing to work with a person of her caliber. And I highly encourage you to look at her website. It's catherinekarnow.com, and we'll put this in the chat. But get on her email list, get to know her, learn about her workshops ahead of time, and you also get a chance to sign up before the public. These things always sell out. So if you want an ultra special experience with somebody that's just at the top of the heap here, you need to experience one of her workshops. So please join me in welcoming Catherine Karnow.
Thank you so much, everybody. I can't hear your claps, but I can see them. Thank you. That was like the most incredible promotional introduction I've ever had. Kevin's angling for a discount. No.
Indeed, I am.
Thank you so much for that. So let's see some pictures, and let me try to share some secrets and tips with you. I think Kevin sort of said it all, but basically, everything I do know is from experience. So I've always been drawn to photograph people from day one. And so day one was a long time ago. So I love to photograph people. I'm always I'm always gravitating towards people. And so this is over many years. So I'm basically just trying to share with you in not a very long period of time, like everything I know from 4 decades. So here we go. Let me share the screen and let's start with the show. Hold on. All these Zoom controls blocking my vision. Sorry. Okay. All right. So, sorry to do this, but once I go to the show, I can't see the mouse anymore. So it just throws me off for a second. All right. Well, let me begin. All right. So welcome to Photographing People.
Just a sec, Catherine.
Yes.
I don't personally see your screen. Sam, do you?
I see you. Welcome.
Okay. Thank you. I got it now. You're all good.
Okay, I hope everyone sees the screen. And
Yep.
here's me. Um, all right, so welcome to Photographing People. Here we go. So sorry, now it's not. Sorry, technical difficulties. Talk amongst yourselves. I'm not getting my play going. Sorry. Trying to unshare the screen for a second. Sorry. This has literally never happened to me before.
There we go.
Okay, here we go. So I started shooting film for many years, and what I love about digital is that I love how photography can become a collaborative process, even more so than when you were shooting film, because you can show the images to people as you shoot, and you can enjoy the moment, as I have here with these young Vietnamese girls in Vietnam. So I want to get right to the essence of people photography. And what does that mean? People photography is complex and nuanced, way more than you may think. And I hope I'm going to highlight what that means as we go through. I think the very first thing that's important is your emotional feeling about photographing people. And I know that a lot of people are nervous about photographing people, whether it's in a foreign country, whether it's in your own country, whether it's your family, whether it's your backyard, the people in your neighborhood, self-portraits. I mean, there's a nervousness about photography that I think comes from some kind of primal belief that photography is invasive, it's stealing your soul, maybe it's the invasion of privacy of people. And there's something about that camera that is intimidating to other people, perhaps, and you're nervous about it. And I want to delve into this. I want to go deep into this as we go through. Where does that come from? Is that really true? Is it really outside of yourself? Are people feeling like you're invading their space? Or maybe it's coming from within you. And what do you do with your own nervousness? Well, I would say that right off the bat, start off by believing that within you is the strong and good and positive intention to make beautiful images that make people, give people dignity, make them look beautiful in one way or another, and that you have no intent to harm. Start with that belief, take a deep breath, get out there and feel that to be true, and then try to project that. What does that mean? I've broken this entire show down to the basic 5 fundamentals of successful people photography. And the very first is project positivity. And what on earth does that mean, to project positivity? It means to get a feeling for the situation that you walk into, whether it's a single person within their home, it's somebody that you meet on the street, it's a gathering, a party, a club, a crowd, a wedding, a celebration, a nursery school, a playground. I mean, I'm naming a million different situations, a pagoda, a church. Try to align yourself with the subject or subjects. In other words, what's the mood of the place? And try to kind of inhabit that and show that, so that the people look over at you, they feel that you're aligned with them. I've literally never used this phrase before, and I just redid almost this entire show last night. So some of this is coming out as a little bit spontaneous and completely unrehearsed, because I've never said align yourself with a subject before. Because I'm trying to really get deep into what this means, everything that I say, and show that you care. All right, now you'll see as we go through this show that so many photographs illustrate each one of these principles, but the main principle of projecting positivity. Don't be an outsider, even if you feel like one. So, in addition to projecting positivity, aligning yourself with the subject and showing that you care, make a connection before you start to shoot, if only for a few minutes. So be a human being and not a camera. Now, right off the bat, you can see that my particular style of shooting is not with a long lens across the street. Not that there's anything wrong with shooting with a longer lens and catching people's faces. It's interesting. It's not really my style for various reasons. One, because I want to make a connection. I want to connect with people through photography. It's what I actually want to do. It's where my desire and my passion comes from. Also, because I'm embarrassed. I'm very embarrassed. I have a very thin skin. And if somebody looks over and notices the camera being pointed at them and they see the camera and not me, I'm mortified. I'll put down the camera immediately and rush over to them and say, hi, I just wanted to introduce myself and tell you what I'm doing. So, and it's also, I don't carry around a long lens with me because they're too heavy. So it's all connected. It's all connected. 3, so important, way more than you might think, is mood and mirroring. What does that mean? People will mirror you, your subjects, I mean, but it's not just your subjects, it's in life too, and your energy. And what you project is what you get. Okay, so if you want, well, I'm going to give examples of each one of these. So let me go through these points first, and then I'm going to elaborate. 4, have a strong radar. Super important. Just feel the situation out. Watch, look, use your eye, but feel, what is this situation right now? And from that will come, do you ask permission? Do you not ask permission? Do you start shooting and then go up and talk to somebody because you don't want to miss the moment? If you start to talk to them first, it's not going to be the way that you see it. These are all questions that come up, and I don't have a specific yes or no answer for some of these because it's nuanced, because photography is complex and nuanced, and every situation is different. But you have to feel out that situation. Seems obvious, but people don't always do it. And finally, watch like a hawk. Okay, you're always on, you're never off. And that comes down to watch when you're looking at the screen on the back of your camera, because try to have one eye on the screen and one eye up on the situation, because how many times do you miss a shot because you're not watching like a hawk and because you're off and you're not on? So stay on, stay focused. Sorry, I already need water. I haven't even started the first image yet. Why do you shoot this way? Because that's how you get those unexpected in-between moments, which then when you're editing, and I use the word editing to mean selecting, you find those moments in there, but you're not going to find them in your take unless you shoot them. And you're not going to shoot them unless you're watching for them, unless you press that button the split second that you see something just slightly different or off. All right, so what's the goal? I mean, what is the goal? What are you trying to achieve in quote unquote people photography? It's images that have impact and emotion. You're photographing people, although even inanimate objects you can put impact and emotion into those photographs too, another show. And to allow the subjects to speak their truth, whatever that means. How do you know what their truth is? Well, you do learn as much as you can ahead of time about the history, about the situation, about the culture, and then is whatever you can try to understand about that person. And then you make a guess, because how do you know whether a portrait is a true portrait? You want to make images that show the soul and dignity of the person. All right, let's start. So projecting positivity. What does that mean? It just means that when you come upon a situation, depending on that situation, because you have your sharp radar, you're going to perhaps have a smile on your face. If you have an unfortunate resting expression, and my resting expression looks like one of deep anxiety and concern a lot of the time, which is actually a lot of how I feel when I'm photographing. So I have to kind of compensate by looking cheerful. I mean, not overly, but I'm very aware of what I look like. What are the optics on me? So whatever that means, in this case, running into these two people in London, and I wanted to take their photograph, obviously, I'm going to come up with them with a positive smile. Hi, may I take your photograph? This is what I'm doing, et cetera, et cetera. Why? Because you want people to trust you and to feel safe with you. Now, two people standing on the street in London may not be very difficult, but it can get a lot more complicated than that. And you want access. You want to gain access to literally going inside people's homes, offices, workplaces, onto the roof, etc., and to the people themselves. Now, what does that mean to gain access to people? It means gain access to their emotions, gain access to what's deeply inside of them. And you want to develop a sense of trust that they can trust you to be able to open up to you. Show that you care. I saw this man coming out of a church. It's a long story. All these are long stories. I had met him 12 years beforehand. I had a photograph in case I ran into him again. Amazingly, I did run into him again in the same village. And he started to tell me about how his wife had passed away a year earlier. So no photographs to start with, just talking through a translator, although the apps now are absolutely incredible. You can have a conversation through your phone. And so I just listened to him, was not a camera before a human being. And I mean, even if you just stopped to somebody without a camera and you had a conversation, you would show that you care. So a lot of what I'm talking about isn't really that much to do with photography. It has to do with how you would be anyway. And then it's taking that deep breath and saying to yourself, I think it would be okay for me to do a photograph now. That's the part that gets tricky. I think that many of you could probably stop and end up in a conversation just as the one that I had. But it's that moment where you say, is this going to be okay to do this? And it's tricky because you do sometimes say to yourself, is this appropriate? Is this right? Is this wrong? But just from my own experience, I can tell you that people almost always more than appreciate it when you photograph. And I'll bring some examples coming up now. Be gentle. Maybe that's what's called for. This very shy Native American weaver, Navajo weaver, really didn't want to have her photograph taken. And I knew that she was very reluctant. What do you do? What do you do when somebody just kind of demurs? Do you notice that there could be a little crack of yes in there? Do you try to open up that yes? I mean, if I walked away on every hesitation or every no that's not necessarily a no, well, I wouldn't have taken the photographs that I've taken now, and I wouldn't have brought a certain amount of joy to the people when I bring them photographs or send them photographs, and other big stories that I can tell you, major stories that I can tell you, where somebody said no, and with putting it, turning it into a yes, it became a beautiful story. So how do you turn it into a yes? How do you do that? Well, first take that camera and put it away. Let's not make it about the camera and taking pictures anymore. Let's make it about having a conversation about who you are, what you do, and these beautiful rugs that you make, and deflect the whole camera. This has nothing to do with photography. I have another example of this coming up. So do you ask permission? The age-old question. Well, the answer is feel out the situation. Just feel it out. Sometimes I'll take that shot and then I'll keep shooting because nobody seems to care, or they look up at me and they give me a certain look. The minute somebody looks up, I'll make a beeline for them. I don't care how far away they are. I'm not going to be very far since they don't have a long lens, and introduce myself and then ask. I don't always ask permission. If I'm starting to shoot and somebody looks over at me with a look like, I don't really care, and then they go back to what they're doing, then it's like, I've asked the permission. I've asked it by the fact that it's, okay, it's fine. If they look over at me with that, like, what are you doing? Then I'll go over and ask permission. It just depends. If it's the kind of place where everybody's going to see me holding up my camera and shooting, I better ask permission to start with. For example, in this situation, this is a restaurant in Seattle. For me to just stand up and start sticking my camera lens right in this woman's face is excruciatingly rude. It's so embarrassing to me to do that. Like, what are you doing? So what I'll do is first I have permission of the restaurant. Is it okay if I photograph in this place? Um, and yes, this is on assignment for National Geographic Traveler, but even if it's not on assignment for a fancy magazine, just asking permission is often good enough. And sometimes working for a fancy magazine works against you. They don't want to be in the magazine. So it's not always working in your favor. So first I ask the place, and then I simply go up to this woman and say, I'd love to photograph you. And then I tell them why. Because often people are like, well, why do you want to photograph me? And I just say the truth, which is, this is looks like a beautiful photograph, and the light is coming on your face in the most beautiful way from the side. And if I stand here, I can get this beautiful graphic behind, I think is Langston Hughes. And altogether, it just looks, it's a really nice shot. And I just say that very openly and honestly. And most people are like, huh, well, can't argue with that. I mean, yeah, I just totally myself, just say it like it is. Here's a situation where I did not ask permission. Now, I do know this man. He's our wonderful guide in Hue in Vietnam. And I basically just said, Tom, would you come and sit over in the chair over here? And he sat down, and this just came over him. I mean, this expression just came over him. And this photograph fits in, quote unquote, other categories of this show, which is, at this point, I'm not going to say anything. And what am I going to do? Because what I do and how I act is all about mood and mirroring, which is coming up. So I'm going to now be completely quiet, let him go in his world. Maybe he's thinking about his parents who are on the wall here. And I'm just going to let this happen without saying anything and let it unfold. Here, this sister of two boys who have diseases associated with Agent Orange, I found herself lying on her bed, just lost in thought. She was not very happy as a person. She lived in a very difficult situation. And I gently asked her, would it be okay if I photographed you? And she, I mean, not through a translator, but she more or less understood. And she didn't mind the fact that I'm standing on her bed, pointing the camera down at her. If you walked in and saw me, it would not look like a pretty picture. It would be bad optics. It's like, what are you doing? You're hovering over her. You're sticking this camera down on top of her. It looks like you're dominating her. But the thing is, that's what it looks like. She didn't see that or feel that. She trusted me, and she allowed me to have access into her very personal emotion at the time. So maybe I could feel uncomfortable. Somebody could walk in and go, Catherine, what the hell are you doing? What are you standing over on her bed for? Why are you standing on her bed? It may not look good, but it's beautiful, and she had no problem with it, and she loved the photograph later. So believe in yourself as doing something that is good. So mood and mirroring, I've already brought this up. What does that mean? That means, I cannot emphasize this with enough importance, that the energy, and when I say energy, I'm not just being woo-woo, I mean the words, the way you say them, your tone, your gestures, your body, how you move, all of that is your mood, should we say, is what you're projecting towards the subject and what they feel. And the way they feel and the way they react will mirror you. So to a certain extent, everything I say, I can qualify and say, well, that's not 100% true. I can give some exceptions to that, which is why photography is so interesting, because for everything you can say, but on the other hand, having said that, but so here, how am I going to be with this person whom I had met? I knew her briefly, vaguely. I just said, maybe we could do a lovely portrait in the kitchen. I love this window light that's coming in. I try to bring them into my process a little bit. Also, I'm nervous. You have to understand, I'm not comfortable most of the time. I'm quite nervous and self-conscious most of the time when I'm photographing people. I just am. So I'm compensating for my own nervousness as well. I don't want to make them overly nervous. So I'll just say, why don't you come over here? This is lovely. I'm using my words. I'm being encouraging. Would you just look right in the camera? That's beautiful. Perhaps just holding the kettle would be nice. I don't want to over direct them. That's another point I'll come to, but just beautiful, just like that. That looks lovely. And I'll just, the mood that you see emanating from her, the expression is what I'm bringing to her. Here, totally different. This one is just full of bursts and giggles. Well, it's not happening on its own. I can tell you that. There's not me hiding behind the camera with a black cloth and music loudly playing and dancers dancing. No, it's basically just me and whoever I could gather up around to help create an energy that was buoyant and full of enthusiasm and laughs to keep the energy going in this situation where I wanted a happy photograph because he was, as I determined by meeting him, and I'd read about him ahead of time, and we talked and we had a conversation, and I felt that somehow a good true portrait of him, at least in this moment, would be that one that was happy, that was joyous. So I'm barking, I'm saying things in English, not in Thai, and I've got other people clapping hands and barking, and the translator's there, the driver's there, his cook is in there, and I get help to help me keep the mood up so I can get this kind of shot. Very different again, the total opposite kind of photograph. This is in the Amerasian Transit Center in Saigon in 1994, photographed for Passage to Vietnam, a book that 70 photographers worked on for about a week. And these are the offspring of American soldiers or civilians and Vietnamese women who, at this age, as young adults, found themselves in a kind of holding center while they wait for sponsorship to the United States, where they believe they will find home and maybe even find their father. But they've been waiting. They're waiting and they're waiting and they're waiting for permission, for sponsorship, for exit. And this had been going on for years. And so when I came upon them here in their sort of dorm room, this was the mood that I came across, that I found. And so I want to keep it this way. So I'm going to be very quiet, very serious, ask a few questions, of course, ask permission, and not really disturb the mood at all. And I had a young translator with me who didn't really seem to understand what the deal was. And she starts to kind of laugh or make a joke or something because she was nervous. And I had to really ask her to quiet down and to get serious too. So it's not just the mood that comes from you, it's also the people around you. And this is very important. So I met this Romanian woman in about a year and a half ago, scouting for what was going to be my new workshop. And she's all full of smiles. Guess what? I want to go inside her house because I always want to go inside everybody's house because I'm curious and because it's their environment. So of course, I'm going to give her a big smile and take some pictures like this, and I'll bring her back these photographs. And this is this kind of mood, this kind of manner that I put towards her that I get back. Once I get into her kitchen, I want a very different kind of photograph. I want a more serious environmental portrait. And so now I'm not going to be joking and laughing for this photograph. All right, so I mean, I love, and don't we all, intimacy. And I love the way that you can find it, you can create it in photography. It's very beautiful to create intimacy between people who want to be intimate with each other. Like here, a grandmother and her grandson on the Blackfeet Indian reservation. And she loves her grandson, of course. And by all I'm doing is just asking them to be physically close and to touch each other. And it gives a feeling of intimacy to them, I mean, they loved this. They felt good posing for this photograph. Longer story, in Vietnam with a group of Vietnam vets called the Dove Fund, and here John Abbey on the right-hand side. I simply wanted to show a photograph of John with one of these Agent Orange victims slash survivors, because the Dove Fund help these people. They donate a lot of money to schools that and professional training for these people. And so I simply wanted a photograph of John with one of these people that he helps. And he's standing on the sidelines, and I asked him to come over, and I said, maybe you could just put your hand on top of the gentleman's hand. And I took this portrait. And later, John told me, he said, that was a profoundly different moment for me than I've ever had, because I come to Vietnam every year with the group, with the Dove Fund, and we see the schools and the clinics that we've built, and we visit with the people, and there's a sort of red ribbon cutting ceremony and so on. But I've never been physically close. I would normally stand back and photograph with my iPhone. So he said this was very different, very emotional for me. This photograph brought him that. So, and sometimes I create what I call the cocoon of intimacy. What does that mean? So to get photographs like this that are very, very soulful, the subject is just looking straight in the camera, what I do is I create a kind of private space. And I'll do this with my words, and I'll do this with my hands. You can see my hands here, to create this space. And I'll talk to people in English if there's no translator around, and they just seem to understand. And I do a lot of gesturing. So I'll say, it's just you and me, and you're just going to look right in the camera here. You just look right here. It's so beautiful. It's just very, very beautiful. And you're just looking right here, right in the camera. And we're in our own world together. Nobody else is here. They're not here. They're not here. And then a curious thing I discovered about a year ago, which is that I found that the camera, instead of actually being this intimidating metal black lens, like horrible kind of thing that comes between us, I actually realized that it is a protective barrier that sometimes makes the subject, and me too, by the way, feel safe. We are connecting, but we can hide. I can hide behind the camera, and she can sort of be in her own world, knowing that she's being looked at, but she doesn't have my eyes. She doesn't see my eyes to make her feel nervous. Anyway, this is a whole new thing I've just discovered after all these decades, and thinking, you know what, it's actually kind of interesting to be behind the camera. And the same kind of idea here, where it's just creating this world where, despite all the noise and commotion that's going on behind, I can just create this cocoon of intimacy with Hue and his rooster called Big Boy in Hanoi. As I've said, be a person first and foremost, not a camera when possible. Here in Australia, I knew that this gentleman would not want to be photographed if I just said, hey, can I take your picture? Even though I had had permission to be in his shop, he made and sold his own didgeridoos. And I knew he would just say no, because it's part of the culture, the Aboriginal culture, and because who am I? I mean, who am I? Just walk into a shop. So we must have spent 45 minutes arranging the didgeridoos. He was fine with me doing a still life. He was quite flattered. I wanted to photograph them. And we're talking about what the symbols mean. And I'm asking him, do you think we should put this one here, but this one leans a little bit this way? I don't know. Oh, this is so heavy. Let's carry this together. So we create the still life together. And then I said, you know, I can't remember his name now. Maybe it should be nice to have you, the maker, with your didgeridoos. And he was only too happy to sit right down. So I was very pleased about that. And that's part of the process. But sometimes we don't always have a lot of time, okay? And you might be with a partner, spouse, friend, group, and no one's going to be waiting around for 3 hours for you to make that connection, put down your camera. Maybe you don't even have 45 minutes. So what do? Well, you can't always get the shot. Okay. I mean, some kinds of situations require that you spend time, and others, it's amazing what you can grab, but you still have to make that connection. I mean, if you shoot just walking by, okay, and believe me, I can see those pictures a mile away. Those pictures that look like, well, I just saw them and I just took the picture. She was so cute. And, or this woman had a great old face and she looked at me for a minute, but then I don't think she really understood and I had to keep up with the group. Well, if your pictures look like that, it's because that's how you're shooting. Okay. And there's no amount of more fancy equipment or a friendly wave that's necessarily going to get much more than a friendly wave back, So, but this guy had a great face in Cairo when I was on a tour with my mother, who was the least patient of everyone. Kathy, please, not another photograph. So luckily this guy he just got it. He's like, oh my God, she really wants to take the photograph. She's super serious. She's obviously with this group. He stares right in the camera. I'm like, this is so great. And just looking right at me. That camel's head isn't right. Let's get his head to turn. And this guy, without taking his arm, he reaches out, he yanks on the rope so the camel looks the other way. I say, can you lift up your bag? He lifts up the bag just enough. And I go click, click, click. And I went, it's perfect. It's great. Love it. And off I go. So this was all of 8 minutes. So you can work it if you only have a few minutes, but you still got to work it. All right. And then, as I've said, maybe that fear, that nervousness, it's only inside of you, and you need to take a deep breath and give it a try. Because most of the time, what's the worst that can happen is something embarrassing, which is terrible. Believe me, being embarrassed, sometimes I just want to go to the hotel room for the rest of the day. I don't feel good about it. But here in Big Sur, I was pretty nervous about photographing in the Zendo because they told me no one ever had photographed in there before. And if I wanted to, I could be way against the wall behind me and stay plastered against the wall, which was really far away and really not the shot that I wanted. But I didn't want to rock the boat because I needed to be there for a few days. And it wasn't just about them getting mad at me. It was about continued access to other locations at this place. So basically, I had the camera on the tripod because it was either late days of film or early days of digital. I can't remember. And I just kept moving a little closer and moving a little closer and moving a little closer. I knew the shot I wanted. I wanted like a 28 millimeter, 35 millimeter, get right up close, have this guy in the foreground, have that guy on the lift and this guy there. Blah, blah, blah. And each little inch that I came forward, nobody shot me the dirty look. So I just pick up the tripod and go, dee, 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 and take a shot, and dee, 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 and take a shot. And nobody looked at me at all. So I thought, you know what? I have butterflies in my stomach, but this seems to be coming from me. Nobody could care less. And afterwards, this guy comes up to me. One of these fellows comes up to me. I'm like, uh-oh, here I go. Now I'm going to get the scolding. And he says, Catherine, I am just thrilled, or whatever he would say. Maybe he wouldn't say thrilled. He'd say, I'm just so pleased. He said, we've never had any photographs in the Zendo, and it's our most important place. Thank you so much. Okay, so what can I say? Have a strong radar and a sharp eye to see and sense how people feel. Try to have it be about what you sense that's out there, not your butterflies that are inside here. And if someone says, I think she might be getting tired and we should stop, I always say, well, let me ask her, are you getting tired and would you like me to stop? No, I'm having a great time. Sure. Yep. Okay. Well, I thought she was having a good time, but why don't you let me ask? Because you don't want to get shut down just as you're getting great access and having a good time with somebody and they're enjoying themselves as well. Maybe you just want to take a break. But I can tell you with Prince Charles that even I knew about him, and not just the fact that he's a Scorpio like I am, but that if he decides he doesn't like you, that's it. You're out. You're gone. It doesn't matter what happened beforehand. It doesn't matter that you have permission and it's going to maybe be a cover story in National Geographic. Nope. he doesn't like you, you're out. So I had to be very careful about him and tiptoe around. And I won't go into everything I had to do over a year, but I had to be super, had to work around him gingerly, not be too obsequious, but not be overly directing, blah, blah, blah. Now, this fellow, who is the most amazing artist in Cambodia, is very, very shy, and he never lets himself be photographed. He did agree, but my feeling was that after a couple of frames looking in the camera, he didn't want to do anymore. But I didn't want to let it go yet, because I just wanted to see what would unfold. And basically, I just said, you know, I have so many sort of tricks. I hate to use the word trick, but ways of keeping the situation there so I don't have to turn around and go, but I'm not quite sure what to do because I don't want to break it up yet. And yet I don't want to anger the person. And what should I do here? I hate the word trick, but what should I do? So in this case, I think I may have said, oh, excuse me. I mean, we can't say I have to change the film anymore. I have to change the card. Okay. Let me just check a setting on my camera. I'm a little bit worried and I'm very quiet. Let me just check my setting on my camera. I'm just a little bit worried there might be a technical problem. If you just give me just 1 minute, I'd really appreciate that so much. Just give me one little second here. And I pretend to be fiddling with something, and he looks out, and I just adjust where the camera is, and I photograph him this way. And I feel that he may know that I'm shooting, but he's not looking over and going, in his own way, the way he'd shut me down, he'd just go, thank you, graciously, and he'd go, thank you very much, and he'd walk away. That's how he would say no. But he let me keep going, and this is a much more interesting photograph and more true. As someone later would tell me, you have absolutely captured him. That is absolutely him. So the truth of a portrait is a whole other subject. How do you know that your portrait is true? We all have many facets to each other. So which truth are you trying to get to anyway? So how much do you direct? This is a big thing, because the thing is, in the very beginning, you don't direct because you're lost and you don't know what to do. Okay, now, obviously, I'm talking about editorial type of photography, not talking about portraits done in a studio where first you apprenticed with Richard Avedon. Okay, no, that's a whole nother story of how he directed. A great story. Oh my God. Look up the Duke and Duchess of Windsor for that story and Richard Avedon. But anyway, so how much do you direct? So at first you don't direct at all. Then you start to understand what you want. So you start to direct, and then you start to over-direct, and then you really over-direct because you know exactly what would make the good shot. Then you get really bored with directing. Because why? Because it's going to come out exactly the way you directed it. That's so boring. And it's boring for the photo editor too. So now the way I direct is I just sort of sometimes, if at best I might just kind of nudge something into place. So a classic line for me is, so what would you do here in your kitchen? So, and would you do something maybe in better light? So I just kind of try to nudge it into place a little bit. But let me show you some examples. So here, this is completely directed. The entire photograph is set up, but it's cobbled together from bits and pieces of actual real life. So what do I mean by that? I find this location. It's gorgeous. I'm shooting for National Geographic Traveler, the Dutch edition. I want to cover, this isn't actually, well, let's put it this way. I want an opener, but I want some people in this photograph, and there's nobody around, and it's starting to get dark. The sun has gone down, and suddenly I see this guy. He comes over with his dog, not here, across the street and down a bit. So I say, oh, excuse me, sir, would you mind coming in? I'd love to photograph you with your dog. Sorry to be in a rush, but it's going to get dark in a minute. And maybe you could just play with your dog here. And I'm thinking, this is good. And then I see him looking over down the street, and I look over to where he's looking, and this gorgeous blonde woman with red, wearing this cute outfit. And I say, well, she's cute. And he goes, yeah, she's my wife. And I went, oh my God, that's incredible. Could you come on over? So they come over. I just said, could you just play with the dog? I don't have a lot of time to explain. It's going to be dark in a minute. And I know this doesn't look dark, but there was one frame that was sharp at all, shooting at whatever, a 60th of a second or something with a lot of movement. And I got my shot, which they did not use as an opener. But so that's directed and completely, like, that's a classic thing that I used to always do. This one I had to direct because I saw her standing on her horse, Isabella, and it was bad light, and it just wasn't going to work at that moment. So I recreated the shot. I didn't set it up in a sense like she's doing something she would never do. I just did it in better light, and this made the cover of Smithsonian. She's now one of the great horsewomen, I should say, of California. This one is entirely directed. This is so highly directed, you can't believe it. Starting with the fact that this was for National Geographic Traveler, and I did not have any kind of budget for assistants or stylists or anything. So all those plants, I'd say half the plants are brought from my house. Everything you see on the table is my silverware and plates. And I styled and made cooked and made and styled all the food. All these people, that's the writer in green. And these other people are just random friends who showed up. And then since I'm shooting at a slow shutter speed, they had to be really lively and then freeze. And they freeze for 2 seconds. Then they get lively and they freeze for 2 seconds. So this is very, very directed and set up.